Welcome, friends, to another episode of Wampa Radio. This is episode number 12. Of course, we are a podcast about Star Wars Unlimited and so much more. The strategies, the deck lists, the news, the notes, the naughtiness of it all. I guess we're going. We left somebody, unfortunately, this week. We have shed the Doa for this week.
Yeah, and it's mostly my fault. We had some creative differences, and he said, "You know what? I'm out as long as that guy is still on the show."
Whoa!
And
I you can't. I didn't even know there was a choice. I mean, let's be real. I mean, if given the choice, Charmer, I'm sorry, man. Okay, so next week we invite you all to tune into Wampa Radio with Flake and Doa. Episode 1's gonna be amazing. I'm kidding, I would never leave you.
And Charmer.
Oh my God! All right, never mind. I take that back immediately.
Immediately made you regret it.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, I guess we should actually dive into the episode. Today, we're going to be talking about the complexities of a 2-lane game, because while it's not something that's new on the market, it has certainly been done before. That doesn't mean that a lot of folks have actually played a game like that. And I think that it's going to be really important when we get more cards released and revealed, and as we eventually start going through them and determining whether we think they're actually good or not. Part of understanding that analysis is understanding why we might think things are good or bad, and it's in part because of that 2-lane game. So we are going to dive into that, but of course we have news and notes, and we also always have the Wampa Cave Pull of the Week.
So the Wampa Cave Pull of the Week, I mean, there's going to be a little bit of Doa influence in this episode for sure, because he kind of actually proposed this on last episode. We did clean up the verbiage, I suppose, the way that we presented it, the language associated to how we presented the cave pull this week. But the cave pull this week is, of all the Imperial officers that Vader force chokes, who deserved it most? So the options were Admiral Oswalt, you had Nita, Mati, and Director Krennic. The way that Doa said this is like, he said, "Who's the most chokeable?" Who's the most chokeable? And in that case, it's just like, sometimes you just don't like somebody's face.
Yeah, well, behind the scenes, I had said, I think the answer is actually Hux. And I know that that's not Vader, but if the question is just who is the most chokeable Imperial officer, I think it's got to be Hux, because that guy drives me up the wall. But
it's actually the person who wrote Hux for two reasons. Number one, for making him chokeable in the first movie, and then for some reason by the third movie he became less of this imposing presence, this commanding tyrannical presence, and more of a comedic kind of throwaway. You know that whole scene where he's like, "I'm the spy." What? You're the spy? It's like, what?
I want to know why that rubs me the wrong way. In all honesty, it felt like there wasn't enough build up and payoff, and it felt like a worse version, a cheaper version of what we got out of like Agent Callus in Rebels, right? When he reveals himself to be, the inside man leaking, there was all of these little hints along the way, and it felt kind of like built up toward it. You also had that like nice moment, with some of the Rebels characters where, they're stranded on a planet together, and you kind of get this feeling like maybe he's not all bad, but you don't know if it's just like that one weird redeeming episode, or if it's, truly that he's not as bad as he seems. Like, there was a bunch of stuff that led into it. And then with Hux, we just literally get like, well, I'm the spy. And there's no emotional investment, no payoff. And it was just worse all the way around. So also, spoiler alert, sorry, if you haven't watched Rebels and you're early on, you don't know. I guess I got, my bad. I should have put the spoiler alert there, but.
Well, I'm actually, I'm on a rewatch, and I haven't gotten to that part yet, but I did, I kind of knew, but ultimately, you're right when it comes to General Hux, because, well, frankly, you don't even realize that there's like a spy or a mole within the First Order until the third movie, and you're like, okay, so they what, like what? Why introduce something that nothing happens with it?
So again, like with Rebels, like you at least get mentions of Fulcrum ahead of time, right? Like there is that build up, and There's just nothing. It's just literally like, oh, well, I just wanted to have this line. I don't, care who wins. I just want him to lose.
Like, and then they kind of recycled that line in Quantumania where it's like, I don't need to win. I just need you to lose. It's like, all right. Like, is it the same person writing these things?
Probably.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Quality.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Oh, with that out of the way, right? Because I thought Hux was the most chokeable. I'll just go ahead and say it. But because we haven't covered the actual results, the person that I voted for was Lorth Nita. And I will fully admit that this has nothing to do with him necessarily being more chokeable from a personality standpoint. And this is instead my need for wordplay and dad puns, because when I look at that, I'm like, he Nita choking, right? I just had to vote for Nita. Sorry, Lorth. But with a last name like that, you need a choking.
I swear to God. Okay. First of all, I hate you. Second of all, okay.
This is what happens when Doe is gone.
Yeah, well, because he just keeps us at least on. I said he intimidates us. He doesn't intimidate us. He's a friend of ours, but he at least imposes his professionalism, and we get it a little bit, like the radiation of it. Like we come like when we're done recording, we have a professionalism suntan based off of what he radiates, kind of thing. So when I was evaluating this and I was gonna give my vote, there was the first one. I was like, okay, I don't think Krennic deserved it. Krennic just may have. It was just that he rubbed Vader the wrong way. Like, because in reality, Krennic did the work to. For the Death Star project, etc. Like, he was integral into that project becoming a success. I don't think that he deserved it at all. Oswalt was an idiot, and stupidity, in my opinion, doesn't deserve the death penalty. I think that stupidity more so deserves, that's where you just be like, okay, you're now going to be commanding a Victory class Star Destroyer that's patrolling like the Outer Rim looking for Minox or something. Like, you give him an idiot's job. So this leaves Nita and Madi. And what I like about, and they're both of their chokings were the result of two completely different things. Number one was Nita was responsible for the Falcon and all them getting away. And he said, I take responsibility. I will report this to Lord Vader. And then it cuts to like, apology accepted, Captain Nita. And he's just getting dragged away. I thought that was wicked cool. But that was a failed mission. That was a gigantic bungle in terms of that. And I was like, it's got to be that. He deserved it because he failed at his job and whatnot. But then I was like, what did Madi do in terms of deserving it? Well, Madi insulted the Dark Lord of the Sith, arguably the most feared and powerful Sith Lord, arguably of all time, and just went up to his face and said, "Your sorcerer's ways won't help us in locating the." And then, are you kidding me? You idiot!
Listen, I think that's why he didn't deserve it, because I actually feel like he's very similar to Krennic. When you think about the kind of asset you want if you are in the Empire, right? Like, you're part of the Imperial Navy, whatever. You want people that are ambitious and controllable. And I think that the biggest thing that Madi did is he was kind of showing that he was not quite controllable, right? Krennic, all the ambition, wants to like have his name, written in the annals of the Empire, wants all that glory for himself, but was also controllable. And I think that's why Vader ultimately chokes him. It's just like a check, like, hey, buddy, cool your jets a bit. But he lets him go. I think Madi was taking it a little bit too far, but I still think that's an admirable trait. So Nita, as you said, just outright failed. And I also think, honestly, that's why Oswalt also got it, because, yeah, you could just be demoted to the Outer Rim or whatever, but this is the Empire, right? If we can't trust you, if we can't rely on you to get the job done, you are of no use to us. So I don't know. Madi was at least competent. He was just cocksure. And so... Well, I don't know. I don't know that he deserved it more than Nita.
He could have gone the whole way. It was Tarkin who said, Vader, release him. And then that happened, which was, it was good and whatnot. So Madi owes him one. But I think that at the end of the day, like there's like both, like Nita made a gigantic, colossal mistake, but he stepped up and said, I'm going to take responsibility, paid the price. But dear Lord, give my regards to your balls, Admiral Mahdi, for being in that room and just straight up saying, like, looking him straight down the face and telling him that his silly sorcerer's ways are not going to do anything. You know, they have the most powerful thing in the universe now and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, there was one answer that was given in the Discord that I really want to read because I thought it was actually quite good. And I love answers that take silly premises and treat them very, very seriously. So this one was from Threat Level Midnight, who replied to the poll on Discord saying, none. Nobody deserved it. Fostering the fear of failure just creates a bunch of yes men that will tell you what you want to hear rather than what you need to hear. While this probably made Vader feel good, it no doubt created a lot of false intel and bad information about how well certain battles would go. It also probably led to a lot of the Empire's best and brightest knowing to stay away from positions anywhere near Vader. His habit of choking officers may have had short-term bumps in efficiency, but no doubt created long-term issues for the Empire. What a brilliant response that is.
It is a fantastic response. And that's also, again, why I felt like Mahdi didn't necessarily deserve it. I also think that's why Tarkin stands up for him, because he knows he's still an asset, right? Same thing with Krennic. I think Krennic is everything you want in an Imperial officer because, yeah, he is mouthy and he wants all that fame, but he also was not afraid to voice his opinion, right? Like that was a rare thing in the Empire because of these chokings. It nails it.
So thank you through Threat Level Midnight. Again, I voted for Mahdi. I thought that stepping up to Vader and sort of embarrassing him in front of everybody at the party was a little bit bad. You said, who'd you say, Nita?
Yeah, he needed choking.
All right, I forgot about that. Probably because my brain
you already blacked it out. You totally just disassociated. Like, all right, that didn't happen.
100% that's what happened. Here are the results, friends. In the lead was Admiral Mahdi at 45.8%. Admiral Oswalt, 31.3%. Captain Nita, Lorth Nita, 14.6%. And our good friend, Director Krennic, Orson Krennic, at 8.3%. So that is your cave poll of the week. New cave polls every Sunday, we hope. Fingers crossed. It was late this week. So you can go to @Wampa Radio every Sunday to cast your vote for the cave poll of the week. If you have a suggestion for a cave poll, I think we like those too. Why not? Why not? All right. News. News this week, I don't think there was anything particularly, juicy from the perspective of other than like card spoilers and such. We had another vote of like, what do you want to see? I think Upgrade won, but let's roll through these, Charmer. Let's roll through the card spoilers that we haven't got to yet. Again, we're doing this early because I'm going to be on a plane in about 16 hours heading to Las Vegas for the...
You are adorable if you think you're going to be on a plane in 16 hours. I'm calling it right now. You're going to be on a plane in 18, maybe 19 hours after your standard Canadian Air delay.
Well, yeah. Okay, for those who don't know, who don't follow my endeavors and my escapades in Flesh and Blood, I have taken this year, this calendar year, 2023, I have taken, I think, 28 flights for casting gigs across North America. Of those 28 flights, I believe 26 of them have been delayed. Of those 26, I believe that probably 18 of them are delays over an hour. And it is death, taxes, and flight delays is essentially the certainties of my life right now. But Logan Peterson, who is your co-host in Flesh and Pod, if you guys are fans of Flesh and Blood, I also invite you to go check out Flesh and Pod with Charmer and Logan. Logan actually messaged me. He wanted my itinerary because he's going to run odds and look at history of the flight to run actual odds for people to place bets on my flight being delayed coming home from Las Vegas. And I told them, I said, also, let's factor in the flake luck. The last time I took this specific flight, which was the noon flight Las Vegas to Toronto. My flight was delayed by, take a guess.
An hour and a half.
9 hours.
Oh, 9 hours. Oh, yeah, that was your long one. Wasn't there a storm or something back then, though?
There was, I believe there may have been a storm in Toronto, which essentially screwed everything up. But it just sucked because it was myself and I was there for my buddy's bachelor party. And my buddy and all my other friends, they're all from Montreal. So they took a flight from Las Vegas to Montreal. So their flight was leaving at 11. So I'm like, let's all jump in a cab together. I'll just wait the extra hour. No big deal. So I went. We hung out at their gate. They got out on time. My flight, while they were boarding, said, there's an hour delay. I was like, oh, damn it. Okay. Well, whatever. And I was contemplating going to get my flight changed to go to Montreal instead, because there was plenty of space on that flight. And I was like, well, how bad can it be? Because I have family in Montreal. I'm like, I'll just go there. Maybe I'll hang out. I was like, how bad can it be? I'm overreacting. So I waited, and then that flight delay ended up turning out. We ended up pushing back at, I think it was 10-something p.m. And with all the flight, with the time and I think I landed, and the sun was up. It was like 7 a.m. the next day. And I was like, oh, nice. This is great. So that's that whole story. But again, tangents of plenty. Let's get to the spoilers, Charmer. Let's start with the first one. This is the Starwing Scout. The Starwing Scout, which is a 3-drop aggression space unit. It is also, I should tell everybody, this was wonderfully spoiled by Echo Base Gaming, friends of the show, Echo Base Gaming.
Yeah, they did a cool video with it too.
We missed this one. I think this one may have released just after we recorded the previous episode, because this one I think is about a week old by now, or maybe like 4 or 5 days.
It was shortly, I think, after we recorded, but I do remember, like I said, that they had a very cool video and they released it. And this is actually, I should also let you know, this is one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about the topic that's going to be our main topic for this week, is because of this card. Because I think that the 2-lane system and having the initiative go hand in hand in terms of determining importance. And so to finish describing this card, it is a 3-cost space unit, just in aggression as far as aspects go. It's a 4/1 stat line with the vehicle and fighter tags. But it says, when defeated, if you have the initiative, draw 2 cards. So this is the first card that we've had revealed that will kind of give you some additional bonuses if you have the initiative. There are some units that I think just inherently have bonuses if you have the initiative, like units with shield, for example, because that will give you priority for getting those value trades. But this is a card that just straight up says, hey, if somebody has the initiative token, they get a bonus. And that's a pretty big deal, because depending on the number of those cards that exist, it could mean some very strategic gameplay with when to take the initiative. Because one of the things that we also haven't kind of really covered is that you can pass in the game without taking the initiative. So because of the back and forth nature, a turn ends when both players pass. But if you think your opponent's going to keep taking actions and then you want to respond, you can pass. And then they have the decision of, okay, well, do I want to pass and force the turn to end? Or do I want to keep taking actions, and then they get to continue their turn? So there's already that depth. I kind of ran into that when I was playtesting at Gen Con, but this adds a completely different layer.
I'm loving how aggression, you brought this up. I think it was you or Doa. Ultimately, we were all just kind of fawning over the fact that initiative and aggression now seem to be fairly married together. And I love that aspect, because initiative means you go first on any given turn. And aggression means that you're aggressive. You want to be the one going first. You want to be the first person putting your foot into the ring, and it all makes sense now. So we're going to eventually do an episode regarding aspect breakdowns, key cards within them, how they play. And this is another big clue of a card. So it's a 3-drop aggression space unit, Starwing Scout. It's a vehicle, it's a fighter, and it's a 4/1. And the 4/1 just reeks of aggression. It reeks of, it wants to hump the face. It knows that it's going to trade down to probably other units. But the one downside that most aggressive decks have ever had in most card games, Charmer, has always been card draw, because everything is cheap, everything dies. You need to constantly replenish the battlefield. And I mean, look at Hearthstone. The reason why the most successful early Hearthstone aggression lists were Warlock was because it had an ability that just drew a card. It allowed you to replenish the hand. Now, the other one was Hunter, but Hunter had a lot of death rattle effects that constantly replenished the board itself. Ultimately, though, here with Starwing Scout, we're seeing the mosaic become clearer. The pieces are fitting together in the framework of what this aspect wants to be. I think that aggression being an aggro aspect, people might think it's going to be a very easy to pilot type of thing. It's just go face, but it's going to demand a mastery of what is possibly the most complex aspect of this game, which is the initiative token, taking it, passing, etc.
We're going to talk a bit about it some more when we get to the 2-lane part, because it's going to be even more complicated than that. But I will say this. One other thing that I've been thinking a lot about recently is, yes, historically, refilling your hand has been one of the things you look for when you're playing any sort of aggressive deck, because your opponent wants to stall you out. I actually think that Star Wars Unlimited has something very unique with the draw 2 per turn. And until we know what the kind of resource cap you want for your deck is for these aggressive lists, there's a very real chance where, you know, if your resources top out at 5 or 6 cost cards, you could hit that very quickly and then just transition to drawing 2 cards every turn while your opponent's still trying to ramp up. And that's another way where you can kind of keep up with your opponent. So I think that there's going to be a lot of things that we have to really kind of change the way we think about aggressive decks with this game as a result, right? Because again, if you've got, you know, a cheap leader, because we haven't seen all the leaders yet either, but if you have a cheap leader that only costs like 5 and you are just really trying to go all gas, no brakes, then, you know, you'll play resources the first 3 turns, and then you're basically just drawing 2 cards every turn thereafter as needed. It's an interesting bit. I do love the idea of somebody putting this down and the other person just going, all right, even if they have plenty more to do, just going, I'll take the initiative and end my turn. Because then they can open up. This only has 1 health, right? So they can open up the following turn, just pick it off real quick, and then you've taken away a lot of the value.
There's going to be a lot of discussion about initiative, and we're going to get into that in future episodes as we see more cards. But that happened to be the Starwing Scout again, revealed by friend of the show, Echo Base Gaming. We got a new leader,
yes,
which I think that a lot of us have basically agreed that this is one hell of a beastly leader.
Yeah, and I'm actually very surprised that we get it early as a leader. So the leader is Boba Fett. This leader has the aspects Cunning and Villainy. It is a ground unit when it comes into play. So when it comes into play, it costs 5, or at least you have to have the 5 resources essentially to trigger the epic action. It has a 4/7 stat line. The tags or the keywords on it are Underworld and Bounty Hunter. But it says when this unit completes an attack. Now that phrasing makes me believe it has to survive as well. But when it completes an attack, if an enemy unit left play this phase, ready up to 2 resources. So you get this 4/7 unit, and the 7 is really the big deal in my mind, right? 7 health means you can likely get an attack in and survive. So you're getting a value trade, but then you also get to ready up to 2 resources. Now, the interesting bit, and I love that this is in Cunning as a result, the interesting bit is that you can't really use this as true ramp, because you can't use those 2 resources unless they've already been expended on something, right? It's not like you just get 2 more resources for the turn. So you have to have already played a card. Then you get this attack in for the trigger to get the benefit. And then it allows you to play more cards. So it is a very high tempo play. You know, when you talk about tempo, you talk about the number of things you can do that kind of speed up the game clock. But it's not true ramp in that regard, and it does require sequencing. You can't lead off your turn with this either. You have to have already expended some resources to get the value. Also, now, just real quick to finish, as a leader card, the passive ability before he comes into play is when an enemy unit leaves play, period. So for any reason, you may exhaust this leader if you do ready a resource.
Yeah, so that part is what intrigues me most. Again, that is the non-deployed version of it, which is essentially something dies. When you kill something, you get a free resource back up. So it's going to again, cunning. We talked about aggression and importance of initiative token. Here is cunning and the importance of sequencing and planning, which again alludes to proper cunning, proper things like that, So I think Boba Fett is going to be a hero that a lot of players they're gonna gravitate to, not just because it's the Fett Man, but also because having additional resources, like you said, it's not true ramp in the sense that you're having access to a wider pool of resources. It's merely that you can double tap on some of those resources where necessary. Especially with the when this completes an attack part feels interesting to me because again, it has to be alive. I feel like the unit version of this leader is going to be a high priority target, like most of the leaders are going to be. But what this does is it doesn't allow you to cheat out bigger things. It allows you to cheat out more things, and that can be overwhelming.
So this is why I'm really excited. When I look at the cards we've already seen from Cunning, which granted is not a lot, but I do like what I've seen, and they already kind of have a mini theme, and that is cards that you would traditionally associate with the word tempo in other card games. So the one that stands out to me is like Waylay, which is not true removal, but it does bounce a unit. Now, in these kind of back and forth style games where we're passing one action to another, a card like Waylay might not have the same level of value or impact, because if they have the resources available, they can just replay the unit. It does buy you a turn, sure, but it's not the level of like an unsummon or something in Magic, and it's also more expensive than unsummon. That being said, something like Boba Fett means that you can set up these very big swing turns where if you've got your 5 resources, you could play a 4-cost unit, right? So you've expended some of your resources. Then your opponent takes an action, comes back to you. You play Boba Fett using your epic action, and then you get rid of a unit, trigger, go back up to 3, then waylay something else, and all of a sudden you've got a value trade. You bounced their best unit, and you played a 4-drop all in one turn. Like, that's a big swing turn in terms of board presence.
But the importance of that, again, is planning and sequencing.
Sequencing, yes. It is going to be very much, I think, the aspect that rewards you the most for understanding the flow of the game.
Wonderful. After that, we got a cool card. This one is from Vigilance Aspect. It is a 2-cost upgrade. Got another upgrade.
Yes.
This also, I think, is cool because, so this one is Entrenched. Entrenched is a condition of an upgrade, a +3/+3, and gives the unit the game text, attached unit can't attack bases. So here's why, the various reasons why I like this Charmer. Number one, it's because upgrades are no longer just weapons. They're no longer just tangible things. They can be, like it says here, conditions or ambient effects or situational awareness or whatever. It can be a something that's happening while we're going, or a positional related thing. The artwork itself, I think that's Mimban. I think that's the scene from what is it, Solo. But ultimately, this is a card that on the surface, you're like, wow. The first thing that pops to mind immediately is jam this on a Sentinel and then let it just stand tall. It's a cheap card at 2 cost with the Vigilance Aspect. It's a +3/+3. You're above rate for an upgrade. Who cares if you can't attack base? To me, this is something you put on your 1-drop, as it were. You put it on something really cheap to really buy time in the early game. But also, you came up with a really cool idea with this. Like, imagine, let's say it's late in the game. If you top deck this, you're not exactly upset.
No, I don't think so. So one of the things that I had talked about, well, there's a couple of things I had talked about, but one of the things I had talked about is the idea of using it like pacifism from Magic the Gathering, where you can potentially play this on an opposing unit so that they can't attack your base. Now, I checked in the quick start rules. It does not say whether or not you can upgrade opposing units. Some folks in the community Discord for the game say that they have gotten confirmation from the developers that you can play upgrades on opposing units. Now, that opens up some interesting play patterns if true, not just because of Entrenched, but another friend of mine, Jason, sent me a message saying, yeah, it'd be really wild if that's the case, because if your opponent has a Vader and you have a hand with 3 Vader's lightsabers, you could play all 3 just to get the comes into play effects to nuke their other units. Like Vader just turns on them and starts wiping them, which is also interesting. You can't do that for one, because Vader's lightsaber is unique, right? So you can only get the comes into play effect. But I just love the idea of like, oh, there's a Vader on the board. I can get the comes into play if I just give up the fact that like I'm putting it on my unit, sort of thing. I don't know. There's a lot there. So we'll have to wait to get like true hard confirmation, because I haven't personally seen it. I'm sure it'll come up next dev live stream, but even just thinking through possible scenarios like that got me really excited for how I viewed upgrades. And like you said, now it's a condition. So when you think about like our custom cards we talked about, and you had that Thrawn's Orders idea, that's within the realm of possibility now. You and I have also tossed around the idea of, you know, pilots as upgrades. So like you play the Han Solo upgrade for the Millennium Falcon to boost that. Well, that's within the realm of possibility now as well, in my mind, because we know upgrades can be a bunch of things. So just a really cool teaser, all like in a little capsule. Again, I love reveal season because they give you a little, and then there's so much more info that you kind of get from it, even though they gave you a little.
Well, especially the initial spoiler season, because now we know we're not just getting the cards and what they do. We're getting kind of these little bits and pieces of the nuanced rules that are not printed in the quick start, you know? So we get to see what is possible, not just what exists. And I like that aspect of this season as well. So that is Entrenched. We have a 2-pack of reveals from Rolling Dice and Taking Names, another awesome contributor to the community. What do we got for this next set here?
Oh man, these both had me so excited when I saw this reveal. The first one is a event or command. It is called Resupply. I know this is a shocker, but the kind of keyword tag is supply. Now, Resupply costs 3, and it says put this event into play as a resource. So if you've played any other card game, this is affectionately known as ramp, where you are ramping up the number of resources you have. So you're spending resources now and kind of not, advancing your board state, but it allows you to play things faster. And when we combine this with the card that we had the pleasure to reveal, what I call DJ Death Star, that means that command is kind of slowly but surely becoming the aspect where I expect a lot of ramping, right? So that you can play these big, powerful, Star Destroyers or other big units, which, I'll let you do the other one, but there was, as you said, a pair of reveals, and I think that these two went very well together.
Oh, thank you for letting me do this one. But really quickly about this card, if you're a Hearthstone player, this is Wild Growth. That's all it is. It's Wild Growth.
Yeah.
Gain an empty man.
Rampant growth.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And we've seen this in Magic has multiple different versions of this, which is basically put it on, it costs 3, put it on a land. That land can tap for two different resources, and there's usually an additional effect, like gain life or do whatever. Wild Growth in Hearthstone, it's the same thing. And they all cost 3. And I think that, when it comes down to it, sometimes this is basically, can I copy your homework? Sure, but that's what this is. Resupply is Wild Growth. But for ramp, love to see it. Next card, oh baby. We were talking about this when we saw the Star Destroyer, and when we initially saw the AT-ST, and then we saw the Star Destroyer. We were all contemplating what is going to be the Star Destroyer for ground, and we have it here. It is the Blizzard Assault AT-AT, an 8-drop ground unit with aspects of command and villainy. It is a 9-attack, 9-body Imperial vehicle Walker Texas freaking Ranger. And he looks like he's like winding up for a roundhouse kick too.
He's getting ready to roundhouse somebody, especially with this game text.
So here is why this card is so damn good. It's not unique too, so go ahead, play 3 of them. When this unit attacks and defeats a unit, you may deal excess damage from this attack to an enemy ground unit. It is basically Overwhelm, but you could choose a unit. It tramples over your thing that it kills and crushes poor Dak Ralter at the gunner seat. It does all of that. It's so good. I love this because when we're talking about ramp, this is the payoff. This is why you play DJ Death Star, because you want to get to the Blizzard Assault Vehicle. And this is the top end, I would imagine. It's an uncommon. We're probably going to see like actual Blizzard 1. We're probably going to see actual Tempest 1. We're going to see the unique AT-ATs. But for now, this is the uncommon one. But like, think about it. It's you drop DJ Death Star, you get a little bit of extra ramp. Maybe you resupply, and then you play your ATST, and then you do some more ramping. And on turn 6, you're cheating out a Blizzard AT-AT, and your opponent is still scratching their head and figuring out, why did my Boba Fett die when an AT-AT squashed my C-3PO? You know, like that's the beauty of a card like this.
Yeah, you actually touched on one of the things that I was going to mention, which is because this tramples over, what I love about it is you actually get more benefit by purposefully picking on the little guy. If this crushes a 1/1, then you get to just deal 8 to another unit. So they might have another huge 8/8 or their own ATST. You can attack a 1/1 with this and then crush the other unit, but you don't take the damage to your body. It doesn't get into combat directly. So this thematically kind of rewards you for literally just stepping on the littlest thing possible and crushing it into the snow. So that's number one. The other reason that I'm a big fan of this card being paired with the ramp reveal is that usually when you are trying to accelerate your resources, you're doing so at the cost of developing your board. And this is also a great series of reveals for our main topic today, which is going to be covering the 2 lanes and why having a board is important in a game like this. So what this card does is it allows you to play catch up, because your opponent, by the time this comes down, they should have a much better board state than you. Even if you're playing other stuff along the way, you are likely ramping, playing cards like DJ Death Star, like Resupply, so that you can get to these expensive cards sooner. And that means they're going to have cool stuff. This comes down and allows you to start attacking and get those 2-for-1s so that you can clean up the board and tilt things back in your favor or back towards like that even 50-50 split. So having a card like this is really important on the top end.
Well, you're sacrificing board development for resource development, and then the payoff comes later. We see this in various different other card games. Green does it well in Magic. There's decks out there that are out there right now that basically just forego any type of board-related development in exchange for getting more land on the board. Druid in Hearthstone does it very well. And if I'm going to equate this to something Flesh and Blood related, this is the Prism. This is the Aura Prism type of approach, which is, I'm going to let you beat the piss out of me for just a little bit. But eventually, I'm going to come to a fork in the road. There's going to be this turning point where suddenly we're kind of equal, but I have the advantage wherein my stuff is better than yours, and it's harder for you to get rid of it. And that's where things turn around. Playing this type of ramp strategy to attain the Blizzard Assault AT-AT. And again, we don't know what the other AT-ATs are, if there are going to be some in the set. But if this is the high end and this is just an uncommon, you can bet your ass that it's going to have some significant payoff, wherein you're going to be like, yeah, no problem. Like, I'm going to you might even forego having a base that has game text for a base with more life so that you can withstand the early turns, have that cushion so that later on, like you said, that 9/9 walker is, if you don't harass and do anything with their little dudes, it might be in your best interest. You might be like, okay, now it's walker time, and now my Blizzard Walker is going to kill that 1-drop that you dropped on the board that may have been responsible for about 6 damage against my health, but now I'm going to step on him, and Vader's the one who's going to be paying the price for this, or Boba Fett's the one who's going to be taking the price on this, or paying the price on this. That's why I love ramp. The problem with ramp is that it can be a risky gambit to do nothing but develop against a highly aggressive deck. And again, the other caveat here is if your opponent has a 1-card answer or a very efficient removal, you could be in trouble.
So I'm really dying to get more than just the quick start rules, because this is also a card where I saw it and I thought to myself, okay, I need to know more about how it works, because the other card I thought of immediately was the First Legion Snowtrooper, which gives an Imperial unit +2/+0 and Overwhelm when it attacks. And Overwhelm as a keyword says deal excess damage to the opponent's base, right? What happens, when attacking a damaged unit, it gains +2/+0 to Overwhelm. But so in my head, I'm like, okay, well, what happens when I have the Overwhelm keyword on this and I deal damage to the first unit? Now I also get to deal damage to a second unit. Does Overwhelm apply to both or just the first? Because if it applies to both, because of like a fun interaction, like this could also become a finisher, right? Like there's a lot of really cool interactions that I want to have sorted out now.
I am leaning towards the fact that it's one or the other. It's because it says the excess damage. So you have this pocket of damage, and then you probably you have to choose. Because say you may deal, like, it's not like a trigger on the stack or whatever. Like you choose, it's okay, is it going to base? Is it going to a unit? And frankly, I mean, hey, options are good. Choice is delicious. We like it. So I think that if there is an upgrade that can give this just standard Overwhelm, even if it's only doing one or the other, the fact that you have choice is incredible. Because what if you do crush their entire board and suddenly they just drop weenie after weenie to chump block it? If you don't have standard Overwhelm, then you're not getting anything done. The artwork too. It looks menacing. It looks like it is just this imposing thing. The fact that the artwork is from the perspective of potentially those units that are like entrenched and defending. You're looking up at this menacing thing. It's got like the Geordie LaForge goggle kind of vision going on. It's got Cyclops vision, you know?
It looks like a bulldog with Cyclops' visor. Like it looks like it's ready to pounce or something, but also hit you with the biggest laser blasts I've ever seen. Like it is imposing is a great way to word it as far as the art goes.
So that's the last that we got. Again, today being August 22nd, it is about 6 p.m. Eastern time. We are not responsible for any spoilers or leaks that come after this until the next episode. We got a pretty good episode today. Again, Doa couldn't be here with us today because he's tied up with some of his I've got all kinds of cool esports jobs that I have to do because I'm cool and whatever and stuff.
Says the guy who couldn't wait to do it tomorrow because he has to travel for his own casting gig, and I'm the one who's I only get to do remote work this weekend, so boo me.
I mean, I'm not going to argue. I'm not upset about having to go to.
We all have good problems to have.
Exactly. I have a trip paid to go to Las Vegas to cast Flesh and Blood National Championships. I'm happy about that. Ultimately, today's topic is going to be two lane games, the strategies, and some of the restrictions involved and how to approach it, the benefits, etc. And it's great that you're here, Charm3r, obviously, not just because, you make sure that my blood pressure remains high and active at all times, but ultimately because you're also somebody who has exceptional amounts of experience within two-lane games. You were a significant part of the Elder Scrolls Legends, which was a two-lane game.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not familiar with the Elder Scrolls Legends, it was a digital card game that was produced by Bethesda, Direwolf Digital, and then later Sparky Pants. And the game itself had some similarities to Hearthstone and also to Star Wars Unlimited, where the attacker gets to choose targets. So whenever I say that, what I mean is If you're coming from like Magic the Gathering, you just say, I'm attacking, and then the opponent gets to decide how to block. But if you've played a game like Hearthstone or the Elder Scrolls Legends or Star Wars Unlimited, when you're attacking, you say, I'm attacking the base or I'm attacking this unit. And that's a really important piece of this puzzle. Now, the Elder Scrolls Legends also did have 2 lanes. That game was a little bit different. Their lanes were called the Field Lane and the Shadow Lane. So the Shadow Lane, when you played a unit there, it had cover for 1 turn so that you could kind of like hide your unit for 1 turn to be safe, if you will. This game, however, does not have that. So it's going to be even more so important to have a presence in both lanes. And that was something that I really wanted to highlight for this episode, because one of the things that I keep hearing when I have conversations with other people, or I see conversations in the Discord or even just on Twitter or wherever, is this kind of talk about like, you know, if you and your opponent are fighting for 1 lane and you start losing presence in that lane, you can just switch to the other one and race them. But it doesn't really work that way in practice, right? Because if I play a unit in, we'll call it the ground arena, and you play one in the air, on future turns, whenever you go to play to the ground, you have to ask yourself, am I going to be able to just get rid of that unit right away, right? Because I already have presence there. So if I've got a 3/3 and you want to play a 2/2 on the ground, well, you have to assume I'm just going to attack in to your unit to get rid of it, because mine will survive. There's almost like no reason not to, unless I'm purposefully trying to race your base damage. But otherwise, that's called a value trade if you're not familiar in card games. So in a game like this, it's going to be really important that you try to establish a presence in both arenas, because you don't want to get into a scenario where your opponent has full control of the zone. So in the Elder Scrolls Legends, one of the decks that I was very well known for piloting was called Mid-Range Sorcerer, and it used, in that game, it was called Ward. It's basically Shield from Star Wars Unlimited. It used units with Shield to make value trades. So I play a unit, it has a shield. When you play yours, instead of attacking you directly, I attack your units, and then you fall behind, because eventually by me just trading like that and getting value, I'll have 4 or 5 units. And then anything you play in my field will die immediately, and I'll have leftover units to continue to damage you, right? That is something you just don't want to happen, because then you do have to abandon a lane, and that feels bad. So the fact that both lanes in this game are essentially open lanes, right? Meaning anytime you play something, unless you already have Sentinel or something else there, you have to assume your opponent will try to target it. And because this game does have shields, just like the Elder Scrolls Legends had Ward, I think there's going to be a premium kind of placed on how you navigate. So when we talk about like aggression, for example, and we keep saying like, hey, I'm just going to, play things and race face, that'll work in the first couple of turns. But if I'm playing stuff that has big health pools, where I can trade into your, smaller aggressive unit and then survive. Think of like Boba Fett, right? He comes down with that 7 health. If he gets to kill 2 or 3 units before he comes off the board, then that means that I'm probably on the ground anyway, scaling harder, so that in the future, you're never going to get to be aggressive again. So there's going to be this balance. Doesn't matter how many cards, right? So we talk about, the other reveal, Starwing Scout. If you have the initiative, it dies, you draw 2 cards. Doesn't matter unless you can start getting to a point where you can match or overtake the number of units I have in space or on the ground. I will always be able to suppress your offense from that point on. So fighting for control with units, and then obviously with our events, interactions, and things like that, but just fighting for control of the space is, I think, going to be a really big deal. And I don't think that it's really like settled in, because people haven't been able to go through the motions very well yet.
It's going to take some getting used to, I think, for a lot of players who, even those who are seasoned card players, if you don't have experience with a 2-lane game, then this is going to be a rude awakening where you might fall into the traps of, well, hey, I'm already super strong on the ground, I can race you there, but you never know what's coming around the bend. And I think that the other part about this is that this is going to put a lot of value on Sentinels, because one thing that you may have to lean into is your strength, which is either ground or space. But if your opponent can outscale you at the other lane, and they just drop a sentinel on your powerful lane, that might buy them a turn to continue to establish another lane and then eventually outpace you on that particular lane. I think the fact that this game is cut into two lanes and dividing your attention and your resource management, it's going to test precisely that, your resource management. Because right now, a lot of card gamers, when it talks about resource management, and I'm talking about this from outside of the scope of just paying for the cards with the resources available to you, I'm talking about the cards in your hand themselves. Right now, when it comes to resource management, most players are learning and becoming better at when to not overextend, when to overextend, when to dump your hand. Because the scariest thing in card gaming is when you're playing off the top of your deck and you don't know how to do that. I think with this is a different type of resource management. It's the positioning of those resources. It's the division of those resources that you're committing to the board. Before, there was no decisions to be made. There's a board to play, and you just have to decide how that card you're playing interacts with the card already in that play. Now it's like, do I even put this card, do I even play to this lane here, or do I shore up a weak space lane, And I think that this is going to add a layer of complexity to the game where the best players that are out there will know when to throw something to the wolves in a lane, or when to abandon it completely, or when to actually fight for a lane that your opponent wants to have.
There will be a lot of that. There's a reason why you want a presence in both lanes, and there's also, I think, going to be a premium on cards that can affect both lanes. And they go hand in hand. That's why I want to highlight it, right? So when you think about Vader as a leader, for example, or even Luke, with their abilities, they can still impact the space arena, right? Vader on the attack can still choose to essentially force crush a starfighter, right? He can deal that damage to the space. There is no limitation there. Luke can provide shields to a space unit. So those are very powerful effects that allow you to kind of have an impact in both areas. We've kind of seen it on the top end as well with Emperor Palpatine when that was revealed, right? He comes into play on the ground. He's a 6/6 with Overwhelm, but you can deal 6 damage divided among any enemy units. So he's a unit where you can play him to help shore up your ground while also asserting your dominance in the air if needed. That's going to be a really powerful play pattern. And I think that as more cards get revealed, it's the sort of thing that you're going to want to pay a bit of attention to, is how can I impact both zones in order to make sure that I don't fall so far behind that I am stuck racing. I actually think that if you ever get to a point where you're saying, okay, I've just lost the air, I've lost the ground, I have to race, I think the game's probably already over for you. I know it's very early to say because, we have a lot of cards that can still be revealed. We haven't seen very many area of effect things, whether it's, board wipes or even just zone wipes. It wouldn't shock me if we see deal a bunch of damage to ground units, deal a bunch of damage to space units, whatever. But until we have those, I think that there's, again, going to be this emphasis on you play your units and then you fight for control of the space. And honestly, I think that that's going to be a really good gameplay pattern because that allows us to live these Star Wars fantasies as well, right? Nobody wants a thing where I played my Obi-Wan, but it's just you and me attacking each other's base the entire game. That's not fun, let's be honest. So I like the idea of the play patterns almost in many ways forcing you to interact with your opponent's units because there's not really a better way to get in the way. Blocking in this game, you have to think about it like this. Blocking in this game is actually a proactive thing. Yes, some units have Sentinel. You can plop those down. Your opponent has to attack them. But in a traditional sense, Magic the Gathering, if you want to quote unquote block a unit, the best way to block it is to attack it first. So that's actually how you block. You establish your presence. They play a unit and you block it by just ramming your unit into it before they can get any value out of it, right? It's just you taking the proactive action of that was my action. And there is going to be a lot of this kind of dancing back and forth between players throughout the sequence of a turn as well. So that's another thing that you have to consider is, maybe I do want to get some units in space, right? But I do my first couple actions on ground, and then when my opponent is out of resources or they've taken the initiative and I know that they're not going to punish me for playing into a zone where they already have control, now I can dump 2 or 3 units so that next turn I have a presence there, right? So that jockeying for position on actions, you talked about resources. It's not just cards in hand either. There's resources on the table. There's resources in terms of your cards, but there's also resources in your actions per turn and how they go back and forth. It's going to be really, really cool.
Well, for the resource part, like what I was sort of alluding to is it's an additional decision that you have to make about allocating those resources. Because before it, if something has an on-play effect, sure, you can decide where you want to do it. But if it's just a vanilla unit, the decision tree ends at, do I play it or do I not play it? That's basically where it ends, because it ends up in the same dang place. And ultimately, there are other games that have inklings of positional related importance. For example, in Hearthstone, you get to decide where the unit goes, in between something, to the left of something, and that has significant importance because oftentimes if something has like a cleave effect, or if something has like on deploy, if it buffs adjacent units, you want to put it between the right things, and sometimes you have to plan out where they're going to go. But at the end of the day, they're all in the same battlefield. It's one lane, and you can attack and bump into whatever you want. The other game that I was thinking about that involved a very different version of this would be Star Wars CCG with the different locations. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You're going to get blown out of the water by an opponent who spreads their forces thinner and presses their thumb on you in that regard, and is very oppressive in that case. But then again, this whole concept of where to split your resources is now very prevalent in a lot of games, that if you look beyond the surface, Marvel Snap, 3 different lanes. Where do I play my stuff? Artifact, 3 different boards. Which ones do I want to, commit to? Gwent, you have to win 2 of 3 rounds, and those each of those rounds is a fresh new board, as it were. So there's a lot of concepts, strategies that you can borrow from other card games to shore up your gameplay in this. Resource allocation is more out there and more layered in other games. Or not, sorry, it's not more layered in other games. I'm saying it's more layered than you may suspect it is in other games. And I think that what Star Wars is doing is just really giving you a black and white, just very contrasted version of this, which is, hey, you choose space or you choose land. And the thing about that also, Charmer, is that in Tessel, that unit you have in hand, you could decide where it goes. In here, the decision starts with your deck building. And that is a huge extra little sprinkle from Star Wars U.
Yeah, I love that it capitalizes on the themes of the Star Wars universe while also challenging you from a deck building perspective, because like I said, I don't think you can get away with just ignoring a zone outright. So just trying to say, like, I'm just going to go full aggression, never block, and I'm just going to flood the ground so that I always know I have more presence there. I just have a hard time buying that that's going to be a winning strategy. So with that in mind, then you have to start saying, well, what units do I want in the air? What units do I want on the ground? What kind of, when I do that, right, like what kind of presence do I want in one zone or the other? If I want to focus on one, maybe it's more supporting units in space, for example, because again, we haven't seen stuff revealed. So there might be stuff where it's like you play it in space and it buffs your ground units or vice versa. And so it forces your opponent to attack into them, which slows down their offense while also giving you some benefits or some bonuses in the interim, right? Like there's a lot of, I think, different ways that we're going to navigate deck building, but that's part of the interesting bit for me, right? Like, how do you solve that puzzle? And it's going to be even more interesting. And, I'm a huge fan of this. I know you're a huge fan of this. Once you go to draft, and you're drafting, how many times are you going to say in pack 3, like, I really want this ground unit, but I've only got like a small number of space units and I need to shore that up, right? Or maybe I take this thing that I don't have in my aspects just because I'm short in one spot or the other. There's so many pieces that I just can't wait to like get my hands on.
That's one of the nice parts of this game is the fact I'm actually trying to actively depart from saying aspect because it's a game mechanic. One of the pieces of Star Wars U that is starting to show its fangs, as it were, is how deep it actually is, because the gameplay and the mechanics are very straightforward. I bump into you, you bump into me, we trade damage counters, first to 0 loses, bingo, bang, boom. That's how it goes. The initiative token, so damn cool. The 2 lanes, the fact that you can't just drop something in both lanes. I still believe there's going to be a card that allows you to play in 2 lanes. I still believe that, and I still believe it's going to be the Z95 Headhunter, but that's just me. But part of this is like we're talking about, like is the deck building aspect, and the fact that even like you, and I'm glad you mentioned draft, because if you see you might get to a point where you're like actively hate drafting space units because you just want your opponent not to have them, or you want but it's a whole extra layer of trying to build a functional deck. When you're building a deck or when you're drafting a deck, you're thinking, I need, at least from Hearthstone or even in Magic, you're like, I need some kind of curve. You want your high end, your top end to be relatively thin. You want like 2 or 3 big stuff, but you have to sort of say, I need a 1 drop, I need a bunch of 2 drops, a bunch of 3 drops, a few 4 drops, a few 5 drops, and then like maybe 1 or 2 6 and 7 drops to just round it out. Now, the conversation is, I need all that, but do I need it in both? And what I think the 2-lane system is going to push deck builders into is there's going to be kind of like a situation, and I want to give a shout out again to Citizen Keen of Star Wars UDB, of swudb.com for putting that stuff together, but they're implementing new graphics and stuff. And what I want to see if that site eventually becomes a deck building site is I want decks to have a very prominent percentage of space, ground, because my suspicion is going to be that the best decks in the game are going to be 75-25 decks, and the 25 of whatever lane you're ignoring or that you're not favoring is going to be very specific units. Stuff like, okay, I'm going to drop my 1 drop and 2 drop in space. 3 drop is going to be a high value sentinel, and then I'm going to start building in space, and then they're building on the ground. I'm going to drop another fat sentinel, but like 10 of my cards or 15 of my cards are ground units. The rest are focused on space. But the ones for the lane that I'm not favoring are going to be brick shithouses that are meant to just stall work.
Must answer bombs, right? Just to stall things out. Or even if they don't have sentinel, your opponent just says, I can't let that stay there, sort of thing.
Yes, but I stand by it. I truly believe that, we're going to see more cards, and it's stupid to make predictions now. But my guess is that the best decks that are out there are going to be heavily leaning of like 66 to 75% in 1 lane.
I think it's going to depend on the factions, to be honest, aspects. I need to make sure I'm clear as well.
Factions are Gwent. That's Gwent.
Right. Yeah. The reason I say that is because Cunning, I think, is going to be one where you're going to benefit more from a 50-50 split, because you'll want to be able to take advantage of the tempo openings, right? I think that specific aspect, just based on what we've seen so far, is going to lend itself to making it hard for your opponent to cover everything. Because I know that we haven't seen a lot of cards revealed yet, but I fully expect there to be cards with Saboteur, for example, in Cunning. And we've already seen cards like Waylay and now Boba Fett. I just think that there's going to be a lot of like combat tricks and things like that. And just stacking one like lane to assert dominance means your combat tricks don't have as much value as they do in scenarios where you're kind of like, it's like basketball. You're trying to force the one-on-one and then just have the better plays, right? I think that that's going to be like cunning. Whereas vigilance, I truly feel like vigilance is going to be like, I'm going to assert dominance in one area and then I'm going to like use restore to make it so you can't race me in the other, for example, right? There's a lot of different ways it can go. A lot of cards still yet to be revealed, but I do think that your deck style will depend on your aspects because I fully expect different play styles. I do also want to give a shout out as well to SwooDB because you said, you know, maybe it'll be a deck builder in the future. I don't know if they want me to say this now because I saw on Twitter they were having some issues with bugs, but they already have deck building as a feature. So hopefully the bugs are sorted out by the time this airs on Saturday. Again, we're recording this on Tuesday the 22nd. But if you create an account, you can already start building decks.
I created my account. You should create your account. That's what I'm going to say. They were very kind to us this week. And I think that most of the community, if not all of it, has been very supportive of everybody else, and we love that.
Oh, everybody's been great.
It's been a good community so far. Let's keep it that way.
Even with me.
Like I said, I think I have my immunity built up, so...
Yeah,
I'm gonna be real here.
It's the Princess Bride. You've been taking a little bit of the charm or poison every day to build up your tolerance.
That must be it. Voluntarily, probably not. Force fed, definitely. That sounds more like it. Any last words about two-lane magic before we get to the mailbag?
Yeah, I would just say that as more cards are revealed, I want you to think about this question. If my opponent played that, you know, whether the card has Sentinel or not, right? If my opponent played that, would that be something I would be okay with leaving on the board? Or would I be more inclined to attack into that versus try to reduce the health of their base? Because I think you're going to find that the more powerful cards in the game are ones where you say, I wouldn't want them to continue to have that. And that's going to be kind of like that hallmark. Now, again, lots of cards to be revealed. That's not the only benchmark for whether or not a card is good, but I think that is at least a good starting place is, hey, if my opponent played that, how comfortable am I that I can leave that around for a couple of turns?
Beautiful. There you have it, friends. That has concluded our discussion about two lanes within the game. Some of the strategies, some things to look out for, and there's so much left to dig into with this game. I know that we mentioned this almost every single episode, but damn it, we're approaching. We're encroaching on September. September might as well be Halloween. Halloween is pretty much Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving is like holding hands with Christmas. So in reality, the game's coming out like tomorrow, is what I'm telling myself.
Yeah, basically. So we need to be ready as soon as possible. And also, I'm just looking forward to it. We touched on it quite a bit in this episode, but the game really does hit that nice, sweet spot of easy to pick up, hard to master, right? I think that's the hallmark of pretty much every good card game, and all things I'm seeing are pointing towards that for this game, and that makes me excited. I'm finding myself actively thinking about the game a lot more often, and it's probably only going to get worse as we get closer to launch.
One of my favorite scenes from Solo, the movie, is when Han Solo says, I got a really good feeling about this. I thought that was actually kind of clever. Everybody was probably expecting the bad feeling, which just was, it's in every single Star Wars related content, more or less. But the fact that they just prefaced that whole thing, because I think it's like one of the more early movies, but he's just like, I got a really good feeling about this, which is just such me, because I don't think I would, that's how I would feel. I've learned since then. I am the older Han Solo, but that Han Solo would have been me, because I would have totally thought that things would have been great and things would have worked out. And yeah. And here we are. But that leads us into, you know what it is. You know what it is, Charmer.
Yeah, it's the good feeling mailbag.
I got a bad feeling about this.
I have a bad feeling about this.
I've got a bad feeling about it.
Quiet.
So it's actually the bad feeling mailbag, but we're not gonna.
No, I have a good feeling about this.
Do you? Okay.
I do.
So last week we talked about the submissions that we get at our email address, which is wamparadiopodcast@gmail.com. And this is a submission from Larry H. Could have been Larry D, like Larry David, which would have been so cool. But it's Larry H. And this is this might be a week and a half old. Sometimes we can't get to every question, but we got to this one. It took us a little while, so thank you for the submission, Larry H. Question is, as of writing this, we have only seen 5 leaders. Well, we've got a bonus one. Bingo, bango. I think we got a couple bonus ones. I think we got Chewie. How many total leaders do we have now? Is it 7?
So we have Luke and Vader. We have Boba Fett, Director Krennic, Chewbacca, Leia. And I think that's it so far.
You said Fett, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say 6. As of writing, we've got 6 leaders. How many leaders do you think are in the first set? Knowing that there are 252 cards in the set and most of them are common from the starter decks, what's your guess or ideal amount? I'd personally like to see around 9 or 10. Do you think leaders will always be commons outside of the starter decks? If not, do you think it could cause an issue in power level between rarities? It's a very good question. Let's tackle the first bit here, which is how many do you think we're going to get? I would suspect that you're going to get leaders that are obviously going to have the duality of the different aspects, right? Do they all have villainy or heroism in them?
So far, yeah. So that was something that I was going to highlight when I shared my answer.
Okay,
but yes,
so you go first.
All the leaders. So my answer to this question is 10 or 12. So it'll be 10 if they give us the 2 in the starter decks, right? I expect starter decks to just be Luke and Vader. We know from discussions at Gen Con that Luke and Vader are not available in packs. They're only in the 2-player starter decks. And we know that because there was a question that was asked about, whether or not we would ever get to use those heroes in limited play. And the answer was, not unless they're reprinted or something, right? So they're only in the starter decks. So you have those 2. And then what I personally think we're going to get is a common leader for every pairing of aspect with villainy and with heroism. So I think we're going to have a villainy command, a villainy cunning, a villainy aggression, of a villainy vigilance, right? And then we're going to have the same thing for the heroism side. So that would give us 10, counting the Luke and Vader. And then I say or 12 because I think that we might get for villainy and heroism, perhaps anyway, one that's a dual aspect. And that's like a rare leader, right? I expect the suite of common ones because one of the questions that I had asked at Gen Con was, how are you going to make sure that people have enough stuff to play limited, right? If you have to have a hero, because we come from Flesh and Blood, right? So in Flesh and Blood, there are tokens that come in the packs for the different heroes for when you're playing draft or whatever. Now, they wouldn't give me any sort of pack ratios or anything, but I was told, and I quote, everything you need to play limited or sealed will be in your packs. So given that, these leaders we see with the common value, I am assuming, again, this was not confirmed, but I'm assuming you're probably guaranteed 1 per pack. Similar with there's probably 1 common base per pack. And then we've already seen that there are, rare bases. We got the 25 health, give a shield one. So I think that we might have the, 4 heroism, 4 villainy leaders, and then we might get a rare leader like that's maybe super rare. We don't know all of our rarities, like a legendary leader as well that is double heroism and another one that's double villainy. And that might be like the Luke and Vader that are not the starter ones. So that's my guess.
I think that first of all, I think the pack seeding is correct. I think that there's always going to be a leader and there's always going to be a base within there. And I think that those are just, they're slated as commons, but I think that you still need to draft them. And what I think is going to happen is if you just don't have one, then you just don't get one. Like, I think that it's something that you're going to have to be cognizant of when you're drafting is, well, if I don't have a leader, then I don't have that built-in unit and those 2 aspect discounts or whatever they were. I think it's possible. Again, we don't know what the specific draft rules are yet or the pack seeding. What I am very much hoping for is that these heroes, these leaders, are not anything more than rare. And the reason being, it's the same thing as equipment in Flesh and Blood or lands and whatever. If it is a important element to the actual gameplay itself, if it's a big thing. It's like it even goes beyond lands or equipment. This is something that actually is inherently directly related to the deck building process. So the double, like for example, we saw Vigilance as a double Vigilance legendary event. You need to find a leader. Maybe there's a specific base you want, but there's a double Vigilance leader, and that helps you. So it's okay. This is the base because I want to unlock aggression, but I need double Vigilance here. So I don't want to pay over the top to play these cards. Well, maybe there's a Vigilance Leia or something, a double Vigilance Leia, or like a Bail Organa or God knows what, where you're playing it, but if it's legendary, then it becomes difficult to get, because what if that deck is good? Then suddenly you're short printing and you're limiting access to players playing the game the way they want to play the game, which is deck building and playing within this aspect pool. I can get that powerful cards should be legendary, but there's no way, no shape, no form that I foresee a successful, or rather, I don't see a world where there's no pushback to a leader being revealed as a legendary, because if it's playable and if it's strong, then you're creating a huge problem. In Flesh and Blood, there are legendary leaders. Shiana is a legendary leader. It is an expensive card to acquire. Is it viable? Not really. Is it competitive? No, it's not. Is it cool and fun to play? Hell yeah, it's fun to play. But it ain't winning tournaments. It ain't going to get you, those W's that you covet. So that could be maybe the back door into printing these kinds of leaders. But again, if it becomes viable and strong, it's bad.
So I have a bit of a rebuttal, which is, one, it depends on what the print distribution is, right? Because if they are printed at the same rate as other legendaries, then I think they end up being cheaper than the other legendaries. Vigilance is a good example, right? Control decks are probably going to want to run 3 copies of Vigilance, but they're only going to need the leader once. And if they're printed at the same rate as Vigilance, then those leaders will be very easy to acquire, likely cheaper, because the demand will actually be higher for the Vigilance because you need 3 copies. Now, we don't know what their print runs will be like, so we don't know if that's the case. But I could see a situation where you still have a high rarity leader for the sake of keeping limited a bit more reasonable, because that's the other side, right? We want powerful leaders because, like, let's be honest, everybody loves their favorite characters, and you want some like cool ultra rare version of your leader. Now, I personally would like to see that be done through alternate art chase cards or foils or whatever. But let's be honest, like if you open a really powerful Vader leader, like you're going to be really excited as a player. That creates that feel good moment. But you also don't want those to be like if they're a bomb in the limited format, you don't want that to be in like an uncommon or even really like a rare slot, because you're again going to feel bad if you're not somebody who opens those. So I could see a scenario where they do still print legendary leaders, but they also just don't short print them and they put them in the same distribution as the other ones so that they're still easily accessible as far as deck building goes.
I'm like, yes and no. Like, and again, the thing about it is that you create these feel bad moments where it's like, when they printed Icelander in Flesh and Blood for the first time and she was a Majestic, it's like, yeah, you need one. But every time you opened another one, you felt like an asshole. Like you felt really cheated in that regard. But at the same time, I think that Flesh and Blood, when they're printing cards now, they understand that aspect. It's like, okay, there's a Majestic weapon. It's a rare weapon but we're printing it a third of the amount of everything else, because you
right.
And I think that if they do it that way, you're reducing the feels bad moment, but you're creating the same demand as the 3-ofs because you're limiting the supply to a third. I think that there's too many headaches and there's too many hoops to jump through in order to balance this properly, that you could just avoid it all by putting those cool, unique leaders behind a rare where somebody opens it and like, yeah, maybe you print half as many as everything else, but you're like, hey, you open it, you're not terribly upset that you got that.
I mean, the reality is it's a trading card game and there's not really a good answer one way or the other, because it doesn't matter where they put it. If you need it to be competitive, people are still going to have to chase it down. Right? Like, let's just say hypothetically they take your advice. There's no leaders behind any of the rares. It's only in the common slots so that they're accessible. But now let's say that they do print like a legendary Luke and a legendary Vader that's just a regular unit, but it's also good and viable. You're still going to have to chase down 3 of them. And if they're expensive, you're still going to feel bad about it. So I think that's just one of those like side effects of the secondary market of trading card games in general. And I think that that's difficult to manage. If it was easy, then all these card game companies would have figured it out by now. And nobody, I think, has the perfect solution. So again, I stand by my statement earlier, though, that I think that the way to like really amp it up and have those feels good moments is if you do it through like a chase version of a card. Like, hey, I got my really cool Sabine Wren because I got like the alternate art super shiny foil Marvel version.
I hope they're going to do that, and I think that they are. I think that that's just the nature of the beast now, is you hide the chase stuff behind vanity and not strength or power. So that's the mailbag for the week. Again, if you want to submit a question to Wampa Radio, you can do so going to wamparadiopodcast@gmail.com. You could tweet at Wampa Radio. You could tweet at Watch Flake. You could tweet at that Charmer or that Charm3r. And send our boy Doa a message too at GGDOA if you want to get in touch with us. And we're always lurking about on Discord as well. It's been quite the journey so far, I feel, with this show, because it's a weird feeling wherein it feels like we've been doing it for a long time, but it's only been 12 weeks.
Yeah. I was actually just thinking to myself, like, it doesn't feel like it's been very long, but also it has been 12 weeks. And so like when I say that, it's like, well, it's only 12 weeks, but then I'm like, well, that's 3 months. It's like a quarter of a year.
I'm saying it feels longer
Almost.
than that. It, like in retrospect, like when I'm typing the show notes and I'm like uploading stuff and doing whatever, and I look at it, I'm like, 12? That's it? It feels like we've been at this. And I think it's because it's the content, because we have so much to say and there's never any... It feels like when we go back and do a callback to something, like if we do a callback and talk about, Oswalt biting it, where it feels like, oh, well, like the callback we're doing is to a movie from, the 70s. But
yeah.
So
it is funny because of the content of Star Wars. It does feel like we've been doing it for forever. But I go the other side or the other direction, which is because it's about a game that hasn't even released yet, and there's still so much I feel like that we need to talk about. It feels like it hasn't been long enough. So I think it depends on which hat I'm wearing. If I'm wearing my general Star Wars fan hat, it's like, man, we've been doing this for a long time. And then when I'm wearing my very specific Star Wars Unlimited hat, it's like, we've been doing this for 12 weeks. Like, that's insane because there's still so much to cover.
That's the problem, is that we have a lot to cover. We've got a lot of time to do it too, because there's still so much to talk about and still so much left to behold. And that's a good thing. That's a good feeling. I will say this, everybody who I've introduced the game to has been cursing me for introducing to the game, because they're like, I cannot be as addicted to this that I am.
I had some folks message me from the Runeterra community. So if you're listening, shout out to you, Wick, saying, hey, this looks kind of cool. Can you send me some more info about it? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. And, gave them access to the Discord and the site and the quick start rules and let them know we were doing a podcast. And they're like, oh, sweet. I'll get caught up on all that. So thank you for checking it out, Wick, and other folks. But I still, for me, I keep going back to that piece of just like the best compliment that I could have seen for a game ever was, again, my buddy Jason, who is a former game designer for the Elder Scrolls Legends, was also one of their pro players. Like, he was a top finisher at their first Master Series, etc. And when he said that it was like the best first game experience, like, this was the exact tweet after Gen Con. He said, "On your suggestion, I tried the game. It was the best first game of a game I've ever played. The mechanics felt exciting but familiar. Won my first game while at 29 for 5 turns, meaning his base had 25 damage. He was trying to stall. Using my Vader to choke my own unit, which died, to untap a unit needed to clear the space lane. Perfect." So what he means is he essentially used his Vader to kill the 1/1 that lets you ready a unit. But he was just like, the theming was so perfect and it felt so great. Again, former Tessel guy. That's why all the people that used to follow me from that community, I know if I can get them to even try this game, they will be all in.
Enough said. Enough said. And that does it, friends, for another edition of Wampa Radio. We really appreciate you all tuning in. Hope you're doing well. This is also where we invite you to go ahead and, if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Costs you exactly 0 credits. You can't get that. Even death sticks cost stuff now. Like, it's unreal. Yeah. Nothing you can get for $0 except for subscribing to this channel. And the other option is, if you're listening to us on an audio platform, give us a 5-star review. Trust us, it does so much for us. It does incredible amounts. It takes 10 seconds to just go ahead and give us 5 stars, and it really, really, really helps us out.
You don't have to believe in a hokey space religion, but you do have to believe in the algorithm.
Yeah, oh my God. The algorithm is going to be like this. I feel like if there's this, like, it feels like this overlording kind, like, it's like, he's in touch with the Force. It's like, oh, he's well attuned to the algorithm. Like, it's that kind of ominous, invisible presence that kind of, it connects us all and all this other nonsense. But yeah, anywho, Charmer, lock and load, buddy. Let's do this, friends. Thank you so much for listening to the Wampa Radio broadcast here. For Charmer, for me, we love you. Be kind to one another, and as always,
may the Force be with you.